Welcome to the RotoWire Wild Card Weekend reaction show to the Sunday games. We already did a show that covered the Saturday games. If you missed that, you can catch that where you're watching it right now. We did that yesterday, or we actually did it Saturday night. So you want to catch that there. Remember, you get a free trial at RotoWire, no credit card need. We cover all the sports. If you're even looking at baseball now, we got the best baseball coverage on the planet. You can get a free trial. Again, go to rotowire.com/Jim. We got stuff up on our socials all the time. If you haven't subscribed to the RotoWire Fantasy Football channel, please do so. We'll have stuff going up all over the offseason. Anthony, big games all weekend long, but we had four basically blowouts. We finally got a competitive one. We got Commanders, Buccaneers. First of all, before the playoffs started, I started to think as I was previewing all these games, and I started saying to myself, you know what? The playoff field, aside from the top seeds, it really isn't that great. When I really thought it through, Chargers were a nice team. And the same thing, the Broncos were a nice team. The Texans have a couple nice things going for them. None of those three teams were really great football teams. Whether they advanced or not is immaterial. And then we get to the NFC. Again, the Buccaneers and the Commanders, they had nice seasons. They had some nice things going for them. But these are not like serious Super Bowl contender type teams. And we go back through the Packers. So ultimately, when I look back on it, the blowouts that happened in most of these games, other than the one we'll talk about first, that didn't surprise me. Any thoughts on that?
No, it didn't surprise me either. And it's good. You can look at the entire playoff picture and you can create these ranges of outcomes, especially for the lower teams. Yes, any given Sunday, they can win this matchup, they have this quarterback, but when it's all said and done and the game plays out and there's a blowout, the thing that creeps back into my mind is adding the seventh seed in each conference. I feel like we saw fewer blowouts when the top two seeds, they had the bye week and there was one less game. But the NFL, they did this for a reason. It's a big money grab, right or wrong. And that's why they went to this. And it adds an extra game. And maybe every few years we do see a 7-seed advance. But I think we should get used to these types of games on Wild Card Weekend.
Yeah, and I think that's ultimately right. Some years the 7th seed is merited. Most years is not. And I'm not a big college football guy, but I know they finally went away from the short-lived 4-team playoff to 12. Well, what were the 4 teams in the Final Four? The 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th seed. All the 4 teams that made it wouldn't even have been in the playoffs in college football in any previous year. So what does that tell us? So, yeah, you're right. The quality of football on Wild Card Weekend could be problematic. And as we get to talking about later, right now with the games that are set, 2 of the 3 games that are set in the divisional round, they're over a touchdown in point spread. That's abnormal for divisional round. Normally these are like 0 to 4 point lines. But let's get to our first game of the day, and we'll be circling through to all this stuff. Commanders at the Buccaneers. So first of all, this was a game that I thought would be close regardless. What surprised me was the Commanders came out with a really good game plan, despite not being able to run the ball, which they didn't. They found a creative way to hold the ball for 35 minutes. They basically did a lot of no huddle stuff. That surprised me. But when they went no huddle, they ran the play clock down. And that was smart because the Buccaneers didn't have a lot of possessions here. So first of all, smart game plan, because it usually never works. If you can't run the ball, you can't control the clock. I thought that was genius, Anthony.
Yeah, this was a good game between these two teams. It was one of my favorite games, if not my favorite game of the weekend, and it didn't disappoint. I think both these sides, they played their absolute best football, but it was all said and done. The Commanders came out on top. This is what Jaden Daniels has done all season long. We've seen him pull out these miraculous games. Even going back to the Hail Mary game in Chicago, they won a lot of close games. They pulled it out, even though Daniels wasn't the quarterback in the season finale against Dallas. So I think the Commanders played Commander football, even though I thought the Bucs were the better team.
Another thing the Commanders did well, when you broke this game down going into it, You knew that all season. They loved throwing screens to the running backs, and they threw some. Brian Robinson had 5 targets, Eckler had 4. So they threw 9 passes to their running backs, and they threw a lot of passes to the tight end. And those were places you could attack the Buccaneers. But the thing that I thought was very good by Cliff Kingsbury in this game was realizing, even before Jamel Dean went down with the knee injury, Buccaneers don't have good corners, and you can attack them. So Terry McLaurin and De'Ami Brown both go for 89 yards and a touchdown. Now, no surprise McLaurin did that, but De'Ami Brown has been very, very little of a factor this year. But especially when we saw Dean go out late in the game, they just kept pounding targets on those wide receivers. So again, I just think the coaching, and this is playoff coaching, you take advantage of your opponent's weakness. You would think that's the case any week of the season. But what we saw here, that was not the case because they haven't done this all year. They made 2 wide receivers relevant in this game. Zach Ertz was kind of the lone man out, 2 for 23. But why would you go to Zach Ertz when De'Ami Brown's getting yards after the catch and creating bigger plays? Because that's not Zach Ertz's game anyway.
Yeah, De'Ami Brown, focusing on him for a second, down the stretch, he became more involved. He had quite a few games with 4 and 5 targets between week 13 and week 18. He didn't see below 4. And he's a pretty good wide receiver. I think injuries and maybe poor quarterback play kind of derailed him. But it looks like, and Zacchaeus played, they had Noah Brown. De'Ami Brown might be a thing here, especially if they're going to make any type of noise for the rest of the postseason. I like that you brought up the Jamel Dean injury because they didn't even take a play off. They attacked that cornerback right at, and I think that made the big difference in the game. I think maybe it's a different outcome if Dean doesn't go down.
Now, Washington didn't play the best game. They turned the ball over, which was a problem. I shouldn't say they turned it over. What they do is they didn't capitalize in the red zone. I misqualified it. In the red zone, they had 2 straight possessions in the late third quarter where they were inside the 10-yard line, 1st and goal, against what is not a very good Tampa defense. First drive, they did get a field goal, but they were right at the goal line. They had a 1st and goal at the 1 on the next drive, and they don't score at all. Fortunately, Baker Mayfield then mishandles that snap. Bobby Wagner picks it up, and then the Commanders are able to go in and score. But you cannot play 2 series inside the 10 and come away with 3 points in the playoffs unless it's a team that, again, like the Buccaneers, are not a dominant team. If the Commanders were to do that against the Lions, it would be game over. Yeah. They would get blown out if that happened. So this is still a team. They are clearly a work in progress. They have had some big wins during the season. This was a big win for them. Again, I didn't like the fact they were celebrating so hard after the game. You won a wild card game against a team that you were 2 games better than in the record column. Look, Tampa Bay won their division. God bless them for that. But they were 10-7. The Commanders were 12-5. The Commanders, again, they were 2 games better. Celebrating like that always gets me worried because if you're going to lay out that emotional burst in a game like that, and I said that about the Texans as well, that doesn't bode well when you're going to walk into the literal Lions Den in Detroit next week.
You brought up those 2 sequences inside the 10 and how the Commanders were lucky to overcome that. And what I immediately think of, right, because it was against the Lions, week 18. The Vikings, first quarter, back-to-back sequences inside the 10. They come away with either 0 or 3 points, and they got blown out that game. And the Commanders get the Lions next. They need to find a way to put points on the board because you're not going to win this game with defense. I respect Dan Quinn, has great defense. He doesn't have the personnel to shut down the Lions. Not many do, but they're going to have to keep up with Detroit somehow.
100%. And the tactic that worked here was controlling the clock. Good luck. We'll talk about that later, but good luck doing it against the Lions. Let's talk about the Buccaneers. So, look, it was a great season for the Buccaneers. Liam Cohen did a wonderful job coaching the offense. It was a masterpiece from week 1 to week 18. Yes, there were some flaws in it. The emergence of Bucky Irving was a beautiful thing. He completely came in and became the guy after being the clear number 2 early in the season. They identified the better player. They gave him the ball. Mike Evans in this game. A lot of us were wondering, what will Marshawn Lattimore do to him? Well, Lattimore doesn't look like the player he did look like maybe a little bit in the past. He was hurt a lot this year, but Evans completely had his way with him. I also think that it helped, though, that Baker Mayfield, I believe, told Mike Evans, "You're getting the ball. I don't care who's defending you." And he was drilling strikes to Mike Evans. There were earlier times, a couple of them where the windows weren't like completely clear. He threw darts. And I think that was a beautiful thing. And then Mike Evans just built on that. And Mike Evans just running after the catch, just making plays. Mike Evans was the only player on the Bucs that brought it for fourth quarters. Any thoughts on the Bucs?
Yeah, I really bought into Tampa Bay. They had some impressive wins. They've had some unimpressive losses this year. They were a very hard team to figure out. Obviously they beat Philly without their two top wide receivers. They also beat Washington week 1. They found a way to beat Detroit. They also lost to teams like Dallas without Dak Prescott, and had some other questionable losses or games that should have been more, or games that they won that should have been blowouts that were kind of close calls. I thought Tampa Bay should have won this game at home. They obviously did not, but you bring up Liam Cohen. He's going to get head coaching opportunities, but if I'm Liam Cohen, I'm doing everything I can. I want to stay in Tampa Bay because next year he could be Ben Johnson and have his choice of jobs. And if I'm Tampa Bay, I'm doing some serious soul searching about Todd Bowles, and maybe I'm not letting Liam Cohen go and making him my next head coach.
Another thing,
I like everything he's done for this Tampa offense and Baker Mayfield.
I like that analysis of that maybe Cohen another year. We'll see how that shakes out. Money ultimately talks. If somebody throws a bag of cash at him, he may just run with that. But like you said, it may be overall well for him. And I do hope Chris Godwin gets healthy and re-signs with them. So I know he's a free agent, but it'd be nice to see him come back and be healthy. We'll see how that goes as well. Now, I do want to point out that the Commanders ran 68 scrimmage plays, which is not a big number. It's a little more than average. The Bucs ran 43 offensive plays in this game, and they ran 25 times and passed 18. And I understand why. They knew their defense was flawed. And I really believe they wanted to run the ball also to keep that defense off the field. Because they were on the field when the Commanders were holding the ball. I think that they wanted to make sure they did what they could to try to equal that. But I think that played against the Buccaneers. I think the Buccaneers, with that bad defense, you want to play more high variance football. You want to throw more and put the pressure on Washington and see if that passing game gets uncorked. Buccaneers come out of this game with 20 points. 20 points is not a bad game, but we know the Buccaneers probably should have scored 30 on this team. And I think the fact that they didn't put the pedal to the metal on offense and really push the issue. And Irving did fine in the second half. He looked really good. But regardless, I just think the Buccaneers needed to make it so their offense put the Commanders in a spot where they couldn't keep up with them on the scoreboard. Instead, it seemed like they were happy to play a close game. And when we play a close game in the NFL, variance happens. Yeah. That fumble that Baker Mayfield had that led to that late turnover. All of a sudden, you got variance. And then the last first down that happens, and then the Buccaneers don't get the ball back, and now they're 23-20 losers and going home.
Yeah, I like how you put it that they were happy to play a close game. Baker Mayfield, he doesn't always play clean football games. He's almost like Sam Darnold, where you know the mistakes are going to happen, and that's the issue. We're trying to play a close game in a win or going home matchup like the playoffs. Baker only threw the ball 18 times. When he was putting up 300 yards, 2-3 touchdowns almost on a week-to-week basis, it seemed like. You need to open it up a little bit more. Marshawn Lattimore is a shell of himself, was all banged up this year. Meanwhile, Mike Evans is playing at a high level. I think you should have attacked that matchup more because Evans was winning. 7 for 92 and a touchdown on 7 targets. He should have been more involved in the second half.
I mean, when you look at 18 passes, 7 go to Evans, 4 to McMillan, and then 2 to Otten, White, and Irving. That was it. There was nothing to go around. Nothing to go around. No. So I do think, look, Bucs had a nice season, like we said, but I don't think they played this game aggressively enough. And I think that ended up costing them because they had opportunities. They had opportunities in this game. And it's unfortunate they went down to it because this team was playing high variance all season and cashing, and they kind of went into a shell in the playoffs. And maybe, I don't know, maybe from an organizational standpoint, I don't like the way they control this game. So quickly going to Washington one more time. Washington is going to Detroit. My first thought on this game is they control the clock on Tampa Bay. I think that comeuppance comes next week. And Detroit, I think, knows their defense is wounded. And I think Detroit comes into this game, and they're expecting Montgomery back. I think that big offensive line comes in, and they just run the ball down Washington's throat, and they just control the clock. I think a lot of people are thinking the Lions are going to come out and score 38 points, and maybe they do. But I think they are going to dominate the ground and hammer that, because Washington cannot commit to the run. Because once they do, you got St. Brown, you got Jamison Williams, you got Sam Laporta. There is no way you can sell out to stop the run against the Lions, because if you do, you are toast. And they don't have the blitz. So I think ultimately, I think Detroit is in a great spot here. I think this is a great draw for them. I think the Commanders are way out of their pay grade here. And I would not be surprised to see this game end up in the area of 30-10, 30-13. Quick thoughts on that game?
Yeah, unless the Commanders can run the football, and 2.5 yards a carry yesterday. Daniels 13 for 36, Eckler 827. Brian Robinson, who's had a terrific year in the first half. I don't know what's happened. He doesn't look like the same player. If they cannot establish the run, again, Jaden Daniels had an outstanding game. He picked apart a bad secondary. Detroit's going to have their way with Jaden Daniels. He's going to make some mistakes if he has to drop back 35 times and they can't establish any type of running game.
They are going to send people, and having Alex Anzalone back has really helped them. He can defend a little bit of tight end or running back out of the backfield. That probably where he's a little better. That's going to be a limiting thing. And I think with the pressure they're going to put on Daniels, he's not going to have time to sit back and read. He's going to have to react quickly. And Detroit's corners, they might not be great, but they're going to be aggressive. They're going to try to jump routes, and that's going to be fun to watch. All right, let's go to our next game, Anthony. So our reaction is going to be to the Packers against the Eagles. The Eagles win this one 22-10. And the craziest thing was the opening kickoff when Keyshawn Nixon fumbles and the Eagles recovered, and the Eagles go up quickly 7-0. Well, that was about all they did on offense until late in the third quarter. This game was 10-0 at the half, and Jalen Hurts was not asked to do much here. But Saquon Barkley had a few nice runs. But other than that, the Packers played strong defense. That line of the Eagles did not dominate them, and I was really surprised that Barkley didn't get going in a big way in this one.
Yeah, that early play, the turnover on the kickoff, I think that made the difference in the game. That's an early momentum shift. Philly's at home where they play really well anyway, and all of a sudden you give that offense the football within 20 yards. I think that was the biggest play in this game. Philly didn't play well on offense. Their defense did, but in the same breath, I also don't feel like Green Bay played a great game on offense either. I was very unimpressed with this football game on both sides. I was extremely unimpressed with this Philadelphia Eagles offense. And how many turnovers did that defense give them? 3 Jordan Love interceptions. And I also think they recovered that early fumble. So 4 turnovers. And I think you might have had 10 total points off of it. I'm sorry. Most good football teams are going to beat you. And if Philly don't figure this out offensively, it can't be all on Saquon. Jalen Hurts did not play a good football game. I think he had six completions at halftime. A.J. Brown was reading a book on the sideline. That's a joke, but is it going to be a joke when you play a good team next week or possibly in the NFC title game? This Eagles team will not advance unless this offense gets figured out.
You're 100% correct. They can't play this game in the next round and hope to get away with it. They just can't. It can't happen. And A.J. Brown reading a book. Yeah, if I'm only getting 3 targets and going 1 for 10, yeah, I think I'm going to read a book too, because he was probably bored. Now, I do wonder, though, that knee issue. I wonder if that's a real thing, because he had missed a practice on Thursday, and they said they just wanted to get him 100% for the game. But he may be dealing with something. And if he's dealing with something, that's a major problem. Devontae Smith's a very nice receiver, does some great things, but he is in no means a game breaker. And Dallas Goedert was a bully. He just threw down that defender. It was a beautiful touchdown play. So there's that. But if A.J. Brown is not able to run explosive routes and challenge the field vertically, defenses could play them a whole lot differently. And so I'm not, again, I got to watch the all 22 on this and see what Brown did. But Brown probably didn't run a lot of routes in this one. It was very interesting. But again, when they ran 34 times, they ran 21. There was not much passing to go around. So again, like you said, unimpressed with the offense. They did enough to win. But the Packers were a real gettable defense. They were down a free safety. They and Goddard did take advantage. I think that was smart, and they took advantage of that one. But this is unacceptable. And Barkley, like we said, you can't have this game if that you're going to be engine in the offense. That wasn't enough. It was enough to win this game, but it's not going to be enough to win many more. So I think we kind of hit the nail on this one, and we might talk about them going forward in a moment, but we don't know their opponent yet, so we can't do too much on that one. Packers on the other side. Hey, look, Jordan Love wasn't the same quarterback this year. He was playing probably hurt. That didn't help. Also, we saw there was no Christian Watson ACL. He blew that out a couple weeks back. And then in the third quarter, they lose Jaden Reed. They lose Romeo Dobbs. They were down to their number 4 receiver and their offensive line. Losing Elkton Jenkins, that was a hammer. He has been an outstanding interior blocker. He used to be a tackle for them. Been an outstanding interior blocker. As soon as he went out, the interior pressure of the Eagles got a big boost from that. And Love, like I said, I mean, he didn't have a lot going for him here. And the interception of Zach Bound, that was the one that was inexcusable. As to how he didn't see him there, that was like a rookie move. I mean, I didn't even get that one. The last interception, you can't fault him. It was garbage time. The game was over. He heaved one down the field. Fine, whatever. But realistically, Josh Jacobs did not have – there was one drive. He had a 31-yard run. He had a big drive that led him to their only touchdown of the day. Other than that, Josh Jacobs wasn't a factor either. This offense was shut down. But in their defense, they were really banged up.
Yeah. Jordan Love, night and day different player this year. I get you want to note the injuries, but I feel like I've said it to you, and I've said it a lot. The Green Bay Packers, they don't have an alpha wide receiver. Jaden Reed's a really fun player. He might be their best and most versatile playmaking wide receiver. He's not a number 1. I as much as I like Christian Watson, he hasn't shown me anything that he can be a number 1. They have a bunch of 2s, 3s, and 4s. And in these postseason matchups, I brought it up, we saw guys like Nico Collins take a game over. The Packers don't have that, and I think they need that because they have really nice components. In the regular season, you could win 11 games with the personnel you have and the way you play football. But if you take Josh Jacobs out and it's on Jordan Love, we've seen it time and time again. When the game is on Jordan Love, he throws interceptions. Yeah. And I just don't think he has that playmaking wide receiver. Yeah, it's Tucker Kraft. That's his most reliable pass catcher right now. It's Tucker Kraft.
And you kind of point this out. They've got a lot of good players, but they don't have great players at the receiver position. Yeah. And that's important. There's a passing league, and they have a great passing coach. And if you don't have that lethal element, what do you think about the Packers? The Packers have hit on a lot of their mid-round draft picks. But when you think of the early picks they've made in some of these drafts, they have never really had an early pick that I can recall that was like not that difference maker. They never get that difference maker in the early rounds. They hit on so many second, third, and fourth round picks. But again, like you said, they're not like game changers. They're very good players, and they have a roster of very good players. And when you get to the playoffs, it's kind of a star-driven league in some ways. If Josh Allen is like a star in Buffalo. The other guys around him, maybe not as much. He carries it. There's other teams where the stars carry them, and they don't have that star to carry them. So I think you said that well. So going into the offseason, the Packers are going to have to figure some things out. I mean, I don't know. You can't really add receivers. I mean, they have with the players they have. I mean, I don't see them investing a draft pick in them. But it would be if there was, I don't know what the free agent class is yet, but I'd love to see if there was somebody out there. Like if T. Higgins was out there, I'd like to see them add him. But maybe he is not even a difference maker.
I think T. Higgins would be a massive upgrade over what they have, but it's also T. Higgins playing, like I still have questions like who is T. Higgins without
Right.
Joe Burrow? Who is
Right.
T. Higgins without Jamar Chase on the other side? I had
Yep.
those same questions about Brandon Ayuk, and Brandon Ayuk this year, when with CMs, when everybody wasn't healthy, Brandon Ayuk kind of looked human. So, like, I think the Packers need to go find that wide receiver and possibly invest a draft pick, and maybe you move one of your other guys for a later pick. They need to do something, because I just don't think when you have somebody like Jordan Love who just wants to let it rip, I don't know if they have that guy who can come down and get it. Christian Watson's made a lot of those big plays, but he doesn't have that it factor. And I think you need that it factor. Like even Philly, I'm sure if this game was close and they needed to use AJ Brown, he would have been there. They just haven't needed him.
You're right.
Because he had
You're right.
Saquon.
You're
Philly,
right.
Green Bay doesn't even have that option.
No, they don't. They don't. And until they get that, it's going to be very hard to get to a Super Bowl. Now, they're fortunate in the NFC. In the NFC, you've got some wiggle room. At least they have that going for them. But realistically, this team has a lot to do. They were 11-6. It was a good record. Very nice record. But ultimately, this is not an elite team. The defense made some nice strides this year. Was happy to see that. And maybe they can continue to build on that going forward. But right now, this is a team that's very good, but they are just really way off that elite track. All right, let's go to our last game of the trio. It was the early game. It was the Broncos and the Bills. This game was 31-7 Bills, but it wasn't always that way. This game was 10-7 at the half, and whoever the Broncos, Will Lutz missed a 50-yard field goal. I believe did it hit the upright, if I remember correctly? I think it hit the upright, but he was right there. It would have been 10-10 at the half. That was interesting. But let's first talk about the Bills, who ended up blowing it open in the second half. What I thought going into this game was, I noticed that the Broncos have a very good defense, but I've been saying all along, it's a very light defense. They're very small. They can rush the passer well. Their numbers say they're a good run defense, but you could bully them. And the Bills they have a bully offensive line. That's the one type of run style they can do. Well, they brought in a sixth offensive lineman. It was a lot of plays. Like I didn't count, but it was a lot of plays. They had a sixth offensive lineman and a tight end on the field. So basically the game plan was this. We are going to run the ball down this Broncos team's throats. And when we want to pass, fine, we'll throw it. But at some point, the Broncos are going to have to bring bodies up, because once they realize they have no chance, they're going to have to react. And then we're going to throw the ball to whoever we want. We don't have an alpha on this team. It was, Shakir got his 6 targets. Curtis Samuel gets 3. Kincaid gets 3. Knox gets 3. Cooper gets 3. Coleman gets 3. Everybody gets a little bit. Shakir gets a little bit more. He's their top possession guy. Do a little more with that. But that's the whole point. This team has so many ways to attack you. It's very difficult to shut them down. It was really an impressive performance, Anthony.
Yeah, this might be the best version of Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. This includes, those teams with Stephon Diggs. Josh Allen's distributing the ball like a point guard, almost like we see Mahomes do it this year. And even when it comes to running the ball, I know we both say, listen, they're not a power running team, but when they get this backfield going, it's Josh Allen. Ray Davis, not this week, he was injured, but you can get Ray Davis involved. Ty Johnson's has become a factor. And of course, you have James Cook, and then at wide receiver, it's like, you said it right. There's not just one guy who's going to be targeted 10, 12 times. There's not one guy outside of James Cook. There's not another running back who's going to get a lot of carries. But when their number is called, they make plays. It's this Buffalo team's dangerous, and maybe I undersold them. I thought Denver could have gave them more of a game, and they did up until halftime.
Right.
But when it's all said and done, Denver, this is another team. They just didn't have the personnel to keep up.
Now, the other side of the ball, Sean Payton, I was troubled with his game plan. Second half, it's still, all right, it's still 10-7. They're still kind of in the ball game. Buffalo gets a score, but he's coming out in the second half. And I know he had an idea. He wanted to shorten the game. That was what he wanted to do. And he comes out on 2 straight drives in the second half. Run, pass, punt. Run, pass, punt. Basically, game over. And at some point, you're not going to bleed out the Bills. He had to understand in the second half, you're not just going to bleed them out. You're not going to win 13-10 or 16-13. Ultimately, eventually, Josh Allen is going to get some points on the board. And I think it was Sean Payton. He got this philosophy, and he didn't put a practical application in the second half to understand that we have to go get this game if we want to win. And because he didn't go get the game, it quickly slipped away from him. And then when you look at the scoreboard, he said, what do you mean slipped away from? They lost by 24 points. It didn't have to be that way. Denver could have come out and scored some points on early drives, but when you go run, pass, incomplete, you're done. So I was not happy with the way they ran things. They did get the Troy Franklin touchdown on the first drive, and that was the only points they scored all day.
Yeah, this was the going trend. I feel this way about, not so much Green Bay, but about Tampa Bay and Denver. It's almost like they played not to lose instead of playing to win. And when you're playing Buffalo, especially, you need to try to play to win that football game. Denver didn't have the running backs to run the ball down Buffalo's throat. And I think you had to get a little bit more creative with Bo Nix. 4 for 43 running the ball. He's a mobile quarterback. Do you run him more? Like we saw, Jaden Daniels took off 13 times. Can you get the ball in Cortland Sutton's hands? Marvin Mims, he's been really effective down the stretch. Where was the creativity there? I feel like we needed to see that old school Sean Payton creativity from New Orleans. And we're seeing that a little bit in Denver, but we're not getting that fully. And I think that was a difference in the game. You had to get creative to win this game, and he didn't.
Javonte Williams is a free agent. He's got to be the happiest man in town to get out of Dodge. I'll tell you this, though. I will never trust Sean Payton with a running back unless he has his Alvin Kamara. If he gets his Alvin Kamara, we know all will be well. But if he doesn't have him, Jaleel McLaughlin, and look, I'm not a McLaughlin guy at all. I think he's a third down scat back, and that's the end of the day. But he was playing the last month of the season. Double-digit touches in most games, 9, I think, were his bad games. He was taking chunks of yardage for them and helping them. I don't know where Tyler Bidet had as many carries as Jaleel McLaughlin did. Marvin Mims had as many carries as Jaleel McLaughlin. Javonte Williams, who had been in the doghouse, had games with like no carries, had 7. And I love Javonte Williams. But at some point, make up your mind, Sean Payton. Make up your mind. But I didn't even get how he pulls the rug out, and I felt bad. I told people on the props McLaughlin was a play, and McLaughlin, look, he was 31.5 yards. That prop went up to 45 yards before kickoff. So apparently I wasn't the only person in town that thought he'd get some yardage here because the props, when do you see a prop go up 13 yards? Now, I know Audric Estime was deemed inactive, but that's when I was actually talking to somebody. I can't remember who it was. I think it was Alan Soslowski of a RotoWire, and I said, be careful when Estime's inactive that Tyler Bidet is not a thing, which he had that one nice game which came out of nowhere. I don't even get it. Tyler Bidet was a flame out in Baltimore. Again, I just incredible how Sean Payton just thinks you can throw anybody in there in the backfield and it'll be fine. You have all these running backs and you have nothing.
Yeah, it's almost like a sense of arrogance because of how much success he had, because he had a lot of success in New Orleans, but if you look at the backs he had, Reggie Bush, Mark Ingram, Alvin Kamara, they are not plug-and-play guys. And I feel like he treated Denver's backfield, hey, I can make it work with anybody. No, you can't. Because you had a 3 very special running backs in New Orleans. He might have had Deuce McAllister's too.
Right. No question about that. All right, so all that said, again, great performance by the Bills. Take care of business. Do what you have to do. Well, this week's going to be a little bit different. They're playing the Ravens, and they're at home. The Ravens beat them 35-10 in week 4. It was forever ago. And the Ravens were 1-2 coming into that game. They had to win. And Buffalo was 3-0, not for long. But here was the point in that game, and I talked about that before the game. I had been harping on the Ravens the first 2 games of the year because they weren't putting Patrick Carr on the field. They were putting Isaiah Likely out there, and they weren't running the ball. And then game 3, they started to figure it out, and I said, Well, if they get Ricard out there, Derrick Henry's going to steamroll this team. Well, Derrick Henry steamrolled them. I don't remember the yards off the top of my head. It was at least 160. He steamrolled. It might have been 190. It might have been the 199 game where he actually had receptions and went over 200 scrimmage yards because he scored a receiving touchdown in that game. And Derrick Henry bludgeoned that team. And here's the point. Sean McDermott plays nickel defense as his base. He has never said he's worried about the run game. He knows in the NFL, you worry about explosives in the passing game. And his defense is not built to stop the run. And the minute you try to stop Derrick Henry, ask the Pittsburgh Steelers about this, Lamar Jackson's going to tuck the ball and run, or he's going to throw in and shred you. I don't think the Bills could slow this team down a bit. I think the Ravens are easily hitting 30 points if they want. And I don't think the Bills with that real nice spread the ball out attack, this Ravens defense is no joke. They pretty much do everything well right now. They don't any longer have definitive weaknesses. Everybody wants an elite game, and they might get it. I think the Ravens are going to win here.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a good game, but when it's all said and done, Baltimore is going to be really hard to stop. And they're very similar, right? Because these quarterbacks, they open up the running backs, but I trust Derrick Henry more and the way he runs the football. And also, I think Baltimore, especially if they get Zay Flowers back, I like their pass catchers more than I like Buffalo's. Bateman's a former first-round pick. Zay Flowers is good when he's healthy. They have two outstanding tight ends. The way they use Justice Hill, it's almost like another Ty Johnson. I don't know. And also the Ravens defense, the way it has come on in the second half and especially down the stretch, this defense is peaking at the right time. And I don't know if Buffalo's defense, sure, you can shut down Bo Nix and company. How are you going to stop this Baltimore Ravens team that it seems like they can score 30 points whenever they want? Whenever they want.
And they can. We recapped that Ravens-Steelers game the other day, but I just want to circle back for a minute. What a thing of beauty that was, because the Steelers came into that game, and I said this in the preview of that game. The Steelers couldn't defend shotgun run. The Ravens figured that out in the second meeting, and Henry bludgeoned them for 162. And then we thought they'd come back with, and the Steelers had their answer. They were going to just sell out and go after Henry. 5 straight plays. Jackson just ran the ball. And at that point, Pittsburgh was shaking their heads. They were spinning because they were like, we're going to stop Henry. Oh, wait a minute. Lamar Jackson's going to skin us alive here. So that's exactly what happened. And then Henry gets 3 carries on that first drive, 49 yards. So it's not just stop Henry, because it's not even plausible, because Lamar Jackson is the ultimate Robin to Batman. And hey, I'm calling Lamar Jackson Robin here, but Derrick Henry, he's in his own class.
Yeah. Look, going back to the Ravens in 11 of their wins over 30 points, and then their other 2, including the playoffs, 28 points. Like, when they win, they're dropping points on you. Can Buffalo keep up? I don't think question. So.
That's the big question, because this defense is so different. Now, we'll do a deep dive on this game Wednesday. Myself and Joe Bartle will be on at 11 a.m. Eastern, and we'll do the deep dive on all the next round games. Anthony and I will be back on Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern. We'll go over that Rams-Vikings game. We'll react to that one and give a couple more look-aheads to division week. I can't get enough talking about. There's only a few games left. We got to enjoy these. Anthony, any final words as we go into our one last game of Wild Card Weekend?
Now, this game I'm looking forward to tonight. Obviously, a little bit of adversity. They had to change venues because of the unfortunate wildfires. I think the consensus, because of that Week 18 game against the Lions, it seems like they don't trust the Vikings. They're out on Sam Darnold. He turned back into a pumpkin. What I don't trust is the way the Rams have played offense the past few games. They can't seem to score points. Their defense has stepped up. But I think the Vikings are going to be able to get it going tonight. Can Matthew Stafford answer? We know he's very statuesque at this point of his career. Brian Flores is going to send pressure. This is the most opportunistic defense when it comes to picking you off. This should be, I really think this should be a game that the Vikings win and cover the spread.
Now, these teams played week 7 or 8, I believe, week 7 or 8. I think it was 8. And the Rams won 30-20.
Yeah.
A few things I want to point out for you about that game. Christian Darrisaw got hurt during that game, the all-world left tackle, and there were no answers once he went out. Remember, they have since traded for and oh man, why do these names evade me at the wrong moment? The Jacksonville guy, anyway, the Cam Robinson, they got their left tackle. So he's not great, but he's way better than what they would have had. So that was a thing there. It was a very weird game because of that injury. That said, Justin Jefferson 8 for $115. Nobody else did anything else in that game. I do think the other thing with the Rams were like a top 8 pass rush the first half of the season. They were bottom 10 in the second half of the season. So Jared Verse has been great, but there's rookie growing pains there across the board. The Rams, they can handle this line, and I don't think the secondary players can hang with Jefferson and Jordan Addison. So like you're saying, I think they're going to be fine. I am worried about the Minnesota rushing attack. Since losing Darrisaw and Aaron Jones getting dinged up a little bit, that rushing attack does not have any of the luster they had early in the season, but I still think it's going to be enough here. One last thing. I remember the Vikings, who are a zone heavy team, in week 16, they played the Packers, and they realized you play man against them, you have more success, and they did that. I think in this game, after they played them the first time and how the Rams were able to shred the zone, I think they're going to play man here with that blitz package, and I think it's going to be a very different result than the 4 touchdowns Stafford threw in the first one. Who do you like in this game?
I like Minnesota to win, and again, historically, the Rams have owned the Vikings, especially in recent years with McVay, but I think the better team is Minnesota. And Justin Jefferson props, I like him to score tonight, and his touchdown odds are, I believe, -110, depending on the book. That's my best bet. I think Justin Jefferson, he's a star, and he's going to show out.
As of Sunday, Justin Jefferson was plus odds on over 6.5 catches. And to me, it's 7 catches in his sleep. It might not be 10. But he's getting 7 to 9 catches in this one. And so that's one I really like in this one. I like that one. I don't know what to do with Nacua here. Nacua has like 8.5 catches or something like that. That's a high number. In the first meeting, he had 7. I mean, Stafford hasn't been throwing a ton. More than half of his completions be going to Nacua. At some point, like we say in the playoffs, is somebody just going to say, we're going to put a bunch of coverage on him and make other guys beat us? Because that will happen in playoff games. Yeah. And I don't think Puka Nacua is like a Nico Collins or a Justin Jefferson, who are just such forces of nature that if you put a whole bunch of coverage around them, they're going to say, so what? I'm still going for 100 yards. Maybe I'm wrong. Am I wrong on this one?
No, and I like Puka Nacua, but
yeah,
you know, who is he on another team with another system? That's always going to be my one red flag or my one caveat with Puka Nacua. I do they slow him down? No, but you know, if his number, I'm trying to pull it up now. If Puka's reception number is hovering in that 8 range, I'm not touching it.
That's the same thing. I'm just laying off it. I'm not saying he's not doing it. That's a big number. 6.5. If Jefferson's only 6.5, because that's for me, that's like a yes. He gets 7 or 8.
7.5. That's a lot.
It's a lot. That's a lot. So we'll see how that shakes out. I do like the Vikings also. I am laying. I did give him at 1.5. It's still 2.5. As long as it's less than a field goal, I'm still fine with that. Any team, I will say this. If these teams played 10 times, I do think it's like 6-4. I do think it's that close, but I do think Justin Jefferson is a difference maker against that defense. I think Darnold has been smart enough to get him the ball, and I think he'll have enough time to do it. So anyway, for Anthony Cervino, I'm Jim Coventry. We'll be back again Tuesday, 11 a.m. Eastern. We'll go over the game we just talked about. Wednesday, we'll be back 11 a.m. Eastern. Myself and Joe Bartle, we'll break things down. We'll have previews on our social media at RotoWire on all platforms throughout the week. Check us out there. Again, for Anthony Cervino, I'm Jim Coventry. Have a great day, everybody.